The forest had a way of pretending it was ordinary. That was the first thought that crossed his mind as he stepped over a root that looked suspiciously like it had been placed there by someone who hated ankles. The second thought was that his coffee was already cold, which felt like a personal insult from the universe, considering he had specifically told it, out loud as if it ever listens, not to betray him today. He adjusted the strap of his bag and continued deeper between the trees. The air here had that slightly wrong quality forests sometimes develop when humans assume they are alone in them. Birds were quiet in a way that suggested either peace or a coordinated conspiracy. Even the wind seemed to hesitate before touching the leaves, like it was waiting for permission. He had come here for exactly the kind of reasons people lie about when asked later. Clearing my head, taking a walk, thinking about life. The truth was simpler. His apartment's heating system had started making noises that sounded like it was learning language, and he needed a place where the walls did not whisper back. A faint shimmer passed between two trees. He stopped. The forest did not stop with him, which felt rude. It happened again, a distortion like heat rising off asphalt, except there was no sun in that direction. He squinted. His first assumption was that his eyes were doing that thing where they invent problems just to stay employed. Then the distortion folded, not dissolved, not faded, folded like space had briefly remembered it was fabric. He blinked. Slowly, deliberately, the way one does when trying to negotiate with reality, something lay near the base of a fallen trunk. At first it looked like debris, branches, moss, the usual woodland clutter, but then it moved. He took a cautious step forward, immediately reconsidered his life choices, and took another step anyway because curiosity is just fear wearing better shoes. It was a woman. Or at least something that had decided woman was a convenient shape for interacting with humans. She was human-like in structure, 2 arms, 2 legs, proportions that would not trigger immediate evolutionary panic in any Earth species. But the details refused to cooperate with familiarity. Her ears were long. Not elf-long in the theatrical sense, but elegant, extended, subtly angled as if they were designed to catch frequencies humans had never bothered inventing names for. They twitched slightly when he moved closer, like radar dishes realizing they were being observed. Her skin carried a faint iridescence, barely visible unless the light hit her at an angle that suggested physics was improvising. Small lines of soft luminescence traced under her skin and faded, like distant circuits dreaming. She was injured. That part was unambiguous even without a medical degree, which he did not have unless you counted the one video he once watched about treating bee stings. There were fractures in the glow of her body, areas where the light flickered unevenly, like a broken signal trying to continue out of politeness. He crouched a few feet away. "Okay," he said aloud, because silence felt like agreeing to something dangerous. "So either I've found an alien or I've finally lost an argument with caffeine." Her eyes opened. That was worse. Not because of fear exactly, but because they looked back at him with the calm evaluation of something that had seen stars die and was now mildly inconvenienced by his existence. The pupils shifted shape, narrowing, expanding, then stabilizing into something almost human, if humans had ever evolved to look directly into probability itself. She spoke. The sound came layered, like 2 conversations happening in slightly different timelines and agreeing to share one mouth. He understood none of it, which, in fairness, was his life's recurring theme. He raised his hands slowly. "Hi," he said. Then after a pause, as if that might help, "I'm not here to, do anything dramatic." Her gaze drifted to his thermos. He followed her eyes. "This," he held it up, "it's coffee, it's Earth's version of emergency fuel, not weaponized. Usually." A faint pause, then she made a sound that, if translated generously, might have been disbelief. He decided that was fair. He set the thermos down carefully and pushed it toward her. "You want it?" "It's cold, but honestly, that feels appropriate for the situation." She did not move immediately. Instead, the air around her shifted slightly, subtle distortions, like the forest was trying to decide whether it should update its rule set. Then she reached for the thermos. Her fingers brushed it. A small flicker of light ran through her hand, and for a brief moment the metal of the container displayed symbols he had never seen before, geometry that suggested mathematics had developed opinions. Then it stopped. She pulled back as if the contact itself had been a question she regretted answering. He nodded slowly. Okay, so you're either allergic to caffeine or reality. Noted. A sound escaped her that might have been amusement or possibly pain pretending to be humor because it didn't want to make things awkward. She tried to move, immediately failed. Her body shifted, but something beneath her control resisted, like an invisible weight pressing her back into the forest floor. The glow beneath her skin pulsed irregularly. He noticed the ground around her was slightly scorched in a pattern that did not match any natural cause. The soil looked rewritten. Yeah, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. That's not great. She looked at him again, and this time the evaluation was sharper. Less curiosity, more calculation. As if she had just realized he was part of the environment and not just an unfortunate hallucination. Her hand lifted slightly, a gesture, not quite a request, not quite a command, something in between. He hesitated. If this is the part where you ask me to join an intergalactic rebellion, I'm going to need, like, a brochure. Or at least bullet points. The forest answered with silence so complete it felt engineered. He sighed. Fine, I'll assume that was important. He moved closer. Each step felt like entering a space that had not yet decided whether he was allowed to exist. The air thickened slightly as though observing him back. Somewhere above, something small and metallic shifted between branches, but when he looked up, there was nothing there except leaves pretending innocence. She watched him approach. Her long ears angled toward him, tracking not just sound but intention. It was unsettling in the same way being watched by a very intelligent cat is unsettling, except this cat had likely negotiated treaties with solar systems. He knelt beside her. Up close, the details became clearer. The light beneath her skin was not just biological, it was structured. Information moving in patterns too precise to be accidental. Her body was not only alive. It was communicating with itself in ways his senses could only interpret as glow and hope. All right, he said softly, let's figure out what kind of disaster you are. She made a small sound. He chose to interpret it as offended, though it could easily have meant help me, or you are statistically the least qualified entity to assist me in this galaxy. He smiled slightly despite himself. Yeah, I get that a lot. The wind shifted again. This time it did not feel like weather, it felt like attention. And far above the canopy, something passed, too fast to be certain, too precise to be natural. The leaves did not react until after it was gone, like they were afraid of being noticing. He looked at her. She was no longer looking at him. Her gaze was directed upward, through branches, through sky, into something that did not belong to Earth's atmosphere. Her expression changed, not fear, recognition. And for the first time since he had found her, he understood something without translation. Whatever had fallen into this forest had not been alone when it arrived, and it had not been forgotten. He had always believed that emergencies announced themselves with honesty. Sirens, smoke, people running in a direction that clearly meant away from consequences. This was different. The forest remained calm in the exact way something becomes calm when it is actively trying not to draw attention to the fact that it is being watched by things that do not belong to it. He stayed kneeling beside her. Up above, the aftertaste of that passing presence lingered in the air like a thought the sky had not finished thinking. She shifted slightly. The movement was controlled, deliberate, as if she was testing whether the universe still agreed to let her occupy space. It seemed reluctant. He cleared his throat. So, he said, because silence was starting to feel like a vote he was losing, friend of yours, or are we doing the Universal Predator drone scenic tour situation? Her eyes flicked to him. There was a pause. Then she made a sound that carried a structure he almost recognized as language. The kind of sound that made his brain briefly try to pretend it understood just to avoid embarrassment. Nothing translated, he nodded seriously anyway. Got it, very helpful, love a concise communicator. She exhaled or something close to it, and the air around her shimmered again. The faint glow under her skin pulsed unevenly like a system running diagnostics while also bleeding. He noticed her hand trembled slightly when she tried to lift it. Okay, he said, leaning closer. You're injured. I've established that part. I would like to also establish that I am not, in fact, a licensed anything. She looked at him again, and this time there was something sharper in her expression. Not judgment exactly. More like statistical disappointment. Fair, he gestured vaguely at her body. Do you heal fast? Because if you don't, I should probably start panicking in a more structured way. She responded by touching her own wrist. A thin band of light traced along her arm, then flickered out like a dying signal refusing to admit defeat. The gesture clearly meant something internal, diagnostic, perhaps, or existential despair in technical format. He sighed. Cool. Though it's not a walk-it-off situation, great, love that for us. Above them, the forest shifted again. This time it wasn't subtle. A faint distortion pressed against the treetops, bending the edges of branches into unnatural angles. Not enough to break physics, just enough to suggest physics was currently in a meeting and not all members were paying attention. He instinctively leaned closer to her. Okay, I'm guessing that's not migrating birds. She reacted immediately. Her hand shot out not to him but to the air beside him. Her fingers closed as if gripping something invisible. The space between them flickered, and suddenly the forest did something deeply unhelpful. It became louder, not sound. Information? His vision blurred for a fraction of a second as faint overlays of geometry flashed across his perception. Trees briefly appeared annotated with shifting symbols he could not read. The ground beneath them seemed to reveal hidden layers like reality had briefly unzipped its jacket. He blinked hard. What the okay, no, he said, pressing a hand to his forehead. I am officially not equipped for visual updates. She released the gesture, the world snapped back, he exhaled. Right, so you can do computer things with space, that's great, very intimidating. I'm impressed and also slightly offended on behalf of physics. She gave him a look that strongly implied physics had long stopped caring about his feelings. A distant hum passed through the forest. This time it was lower. He felt it more than heard it, like the air had developed a heartbeat and was trying to forget it was alive. Her ears angled sharply upward. She tensed. Even injured, even half-collapsed against the forest floor, she changed in a way that made it clear she was no longer simply a patient. She was a decision. He followed her gaze. Between the trees, something moved, not visible in a straightforward sense, more like absence pretending to be space, the kind of presence that made surrounding light behave nervously. He swallowed. Okay. I'm going to guess that's not local wildlife either. Unless Earth has evolved stealth helicopters with existential issues. Her voice came again. This time it was lower, tighter, structured urgency layered into alien syllables. He still didn't understand it, but he understood tone. Yeah, he said quietly, that sounds like a we should leave immediately situation. I can work with that. She attempted to stand, her body resisted. The light beneath her skin flared briefly, then dimmed, like a system that had just used its last reserve of optimism. She staggered. He moved without thinking and caught her before she collapsed completely. The contact was immediate and strange. Not electric, not warm, something else. A sensation like touching a live network of information pretending to be flesh. For a brief second, he felt an impression of distance, vast, layered space folding into itself like memory. He pulled back slightly, startled. Okay, you are not normal in any dimension I am prepared to handle. She steadied herself against him, her grip surprisingly firm, her expression tightened. Then she did something unexpected, she laughed. It was brief, almost broken, but unmistakable. He blinked. Is this the part where you tell me humans are adorable in crisis situations? Because I will deny it, but I will also probably believe it later. She tilted her head slightly as if considering whether he was worth correcting. The answer apparently was no. Another pulse moved through the forest, closer. He felt it this time clearly enough to identify direction. Something was scanning. Not randomly, searching, systematic, he looked around. We need a plan. She tapped 2 fingers against his wrist. A small projection flickered into existence above her hand, faint, unstable. It showed something like a map, except the geometry refused to align with Euclidean courtesy. He stared at it. I'm going to be honest, this looks like a subway map designed by someone who hates passengers. She adjusted it. The image stabilized slightly. A path appeared, thin, winding, threading through the forest like a decision trying to avoid commitment. He nodded slowly. Okay, escape route, love that, very heroic. Very unlikely due outruns interstellar bureaucracy vibes. She looked at him again and there was something almost amused in her expression now, despite everything. He gestured toward the path. After you, space princess. She made a sound that might have been the alien equivalent of "don't call me that," or possibly, "if we survive this, I will explain how wrong you are in detail." They moved. Or rather, she tried to move, and he supported the process in the same way one supports a collapsing idea before it becomes a problem. Branches parted strangely as they passed, not physically, but perceptually, as if the forest was briefly unsure whether they were supposed to be seen. The distant hum followed, not faster, patient, like it knew something about time that they didn't. He glanced at her as they moved. Quick question, are those things going to politely stop at the forest edge? Or is this more of a "they also tax universes" situation? She didn't answer immediately, then she made a sound that felt like no. He nodded. Cool, 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 just checking. A faint shimmer passed overhead again. This time he didn't look up immediately, he already knew. Instead, he focused on keeping pace. The forest, which had earlier been pretending neutrality, now felt distinctly like it had picked a side and regretted it. And somewhere behind them, something recalibrated its search pattern. Closer, more precise, and patient enough to wait for them to make a mistake. The forest stopped pretending it was innocent sometime after midnight. He noticed it first in the silence. Not the absence of sound, that would have been normal, but the absence of hesitation in the air. As if something had finally made up its mind about what kind of place this was going to be. They were no longer walking. Walking implied control. What they were doing now was closer to being carried forward by a decision neither of them had fully agreed to sign. She was still leaning on him, but her weight had shifted. Not heavier, not lighter, more synchronized, like her body was slowly negotiating a truce with gravity. "You know," he whispered, because whispering felt like it might improve their legal situation with the universe, "I feel like I should get hazard pay for this." She glanced at him, her long ears angled slightly, catching signals he couldn't even imagine. Then, surprisingly, she made a small sound that almost matched laughter again. "Okay," he muttered, "so you do have humor, good. I was worried you were going to be one of those tragic cosmic royalty with no jokes types." The forest ahead split, not literally, it simply stopped behaving as one continuous space. The trees bent their attention inward, forming an unnatural symmetry. The air shimmered again, but this time it wasn't random distortion. It was structured, intentional. A shape emerged between the trunks. At first it looked like a shadow that had learned discipline. Then it resolved into something more complex, an object hovering just above the ground, composed of overlapping layers of shifting light and metallic geometry that refused to settle into a single interpretation. It was a ship, or a question about a ship. He wasn't sure which explanation was worse. "Ah," he said weakly, "so this is the part where the escape vehicle shows up and I realize I've been underdressed for interstellar conflict." The object responded not verbally but through sensation. A soft pressure in the air, like reality acknowledging their presence with mild bureaucracy. She straightened slightly. Pain flickered across her expression, but it was overridden by recognition, relief. She let go of him. For a second he thought she might fall. Instead, she stepped forward on her own. The forest seemed to hold its breath. A thin line of light extended from the object, touching the ground near her feet. Symbols unfolded in the air, gentle, precise, almost ceremonial. He frowned. "Is that a welcome mat? Because I've seen Earth hotels with less judgment." She looked back at him, and this time the decision in her eyes was clear. He understood it without translation. Go with her, or stay. He exhaled slowly. "You're really going to make me choose a life direction in a forest ambush situation? That feels unfair. I was promised adulthood would involve more paperwork and less cosmic urgency." She tilted her head slightly, waiting. The hum from earlier returned, sharper now, closer. The searching presence had finally arrived at the edge of visibility. Above the trees, the sky fractured, not visually but conceptually. Something passed through layers of atmosphere as if they were suggestions rather than rules. He swore softly. "Yeah, okay, that's definitely not weather." The object pulsed again, urgent now. She stepped onto the light. For a moment she paused there, suspended between departure and consequence. Then she looked at him again, and extended her hand. He stared at it, then at the forest behind them, then at the sky, which was beginning to argue with itself in ways physics would later file complaints about. He stepped forward. "Fine," he said. But I want it on record that I'm doing this under protest and mild curiosity. He took her hand. The contact was different this time, not overwhelming, not invasive, aligned. Like two incompatible systems briefly agreeing on a shared format. The world shifted, not violently, not dramatically, more like a page turning. The forest dropped away, not destroyed, not left behind, simply no longer relevant. They stood in a space that was not space in any meaningful human sense. Layers of structure extended in all directions, soft glowing pathways intersecting impossible angles. Distant shapes moved like thoughts traveling through architecture. He blinked. Okay, I officially hate how casually you people redesign physics. She exhaled slowly, and for the first time since he had found her, the tension in her shoulders eased. A voice not spoken but formed directly into perception unfolded around them. It was calm, measured, not threatening, which in his experience was often more alarming than threats. The ship acknowledged her. He turned slightly. Is that your ride? Because I feel like it should at least introduce itself before emotionally adopting you. A soft pulse of light answered. She listened. Then, to his surprise, she translated aloud in fragmented Earth speech. They secure. I safe. He nodded slowly. Great, love that for you. Secure is a very comforting word in any language, especially when said by things that fold space casually. She looked at him, and something changed in her expression. Not urgency anymore, something closer to gratitude. Then the structure around them shifted again. Information unfolded, not images but understanding. He saw it, not as a vision but as knowledge pressed gently into awareness. She had not crashed, she had fled. Not a war exactly, but something worse. A political ecosystem spanning multiple civilizations where individuals like her were not just people but keys. Her presence carried access protocols, diplomatic weight, and something dangerously close to leverage over systems humans had never even detected. She wasn't just injured, she was unfinished business. And helping her meant becoming statistically significant. He laughed softly despite himself. So let me get this straight. I found you in a forest and now I'm what? A diplomatic incident. She gave a faint nod. Fantastic, he said. I've always wanted to be internationally inconvenient. Now I get to be interstellar inconvenient. Career progression. A pulse of approval or amusement passed through the structure. The distant pursuing presence arrived at the edge of their abandoned world. Too late, not aggressive now, just acknowledging loss. Then it faded. He felt it go. And for the first time since the forest, the universe stopped paying attention to where they had been. She released his hand. The connection lingered like an afterimage. You chose, she said carefully. He shrugged. Yeah, well, you were injured in a forest and I don't exactly have a track record of walking away from complicated problems. Also, you looked like you, judge me forever if I did. That earned something like a smile. Human consistency, she said. He raised a finger. Hey, I prefer predictable under stress. It sounds more professional. A soft shift moved through the space around them. He realized something then. He was not afraid anymore. Not because the danger had gone away, but because his definition of danger had expanded so far it no longer fit inside fear properly. He looked around. So what happens now? Do I get a spaceship badge, a complimentary void navigation manual, or am I just winging it across galaxies with emotional support alien ears? She tilted her head again as if considering the question seriously. Then she said, You stay. He blinked. Stay where? Here, in the interdimensional hotel lobby of destiny. He shook her head. Another pulse of structure formed around them, not confinement but continuity, a path not just for her, for both. The realization came slowly. She hadn't just accepted him as an ally. She had integrated him into the system that carried her, not as cargo, as participation. He sighed. I feel like I should have read the terms and conditions. She made a sound that was unmistakably amused now. Then softly she added, Too late. The space around them stabilized, not into something simple, into something ongoing, a shared trajectory. He looked forward into it, then back at her. You know, he said, I went for a walk because my apartment was making noises. And now I'm pretty sure my apartment is the least weird thing in my life. She stepped closer, lightly bumping her shoulder against his in a gesture that seemed practiced across species barriers. He accepted it. Outside, somewhere infinitely far away, Earth continued existing without any idea it had just become part of a much larger sentence. Inside, he exhaled. "All right," he said. "Let's go get me my official Cosmic Problem Enthusiast certification." And together, they moved forward into a system that no longer treated them as separate mistakes, but as a single unfolding decision.